Okay, so today we collected my son's ashes from the hospital where I had my procedure done. My husband and I dropped our kids off with their grandma, my mother-in-law, and we drove out to the hospital, and at the lobby they told us we could wait in the lobby. We told them we were there to collect ashes, and they got very, very, very kind and very gentle with us very quickly. It was kind of funny to watch. They were like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, do you want to wait in the lobby or do you want to wait in the chapel?" And we picked the chapel, and it was a very sweet little, a very nice hospital chapel. And so we were sitting there, and we were all alone, and so we kind of just sat quietly. We talked a little bit, and we waited, and somebody from Decedent to Ferris came down, and they had moved my son into his ashes into a little wooden box. I guess it's an urn, but it was a box, and it was very pretty and very tasteful, and it was very nice. Like they were incredibly kind to us there. We were talking about, well, we were sitting in the chapel, we were talking about, our experience with Planned Parenthood, and they wouldn't even let my husband come in past the lobby for the consultation. Not even the procedure, not any of the medical stuff, just the consultation. And they expected him to wait out in the lobby while I talked to them about how his son was going to die. And that really didn't sit right with us at all. And they weren't particularly nice to me either. In fact, one nurse in particular was just, I've never felt so much like I was in the prison. Well, that's not entirely true. I felt like I was in a prison when I was a kid in school, but I mean, there were reasons for that. It was not a normal kid in school kind of experience. It was a little bit prison-like. But this experience with Planned Parenthood, I really felt like I had accidentally just inducted myself into the prison system for some crazy reason or another. And I was very, very relieved when they told me that they would not be able to give me medical care because I'd caused a scene in the library or in the lobby. If crying in the lobby is causing a scene, then maybe, I suppose. I wasn't like noisy crying, but I was crying. I was pretty upset. They did a few things there that were pretty, I really, really, really like to think that the care I received at that place, or the lack thereof, was not indicative of the normal Planned Parenthood experience. Because honestly, they treated me like a dog or something, like a cow that they were just sort of shuffling through the hallways. It was awful. And I was just thinking, like, I remember being there, and they separated me from my husband. They moved me to an interior lobby where I had to wait in an interior waiting room away from my husband because they were very eager to separate me from him, which did not sit well with me at all. And I was sitting there reading through stories of other women who had had abortions because of Trisomy 18. And their stories were also so bittersweet, where it was like, the nurses were very kind to us, the doctor was very sympathetic, and, they gave us our child's ashes, and, we got to take them home and give them a burial or a funeral, or we got to keep them. We got to have like little tiny footprints or little tiny handprints, because, you do that when you give birth to a live baby, but if you give birth to a stillborn baby, usually there are different programs that hospitals will provide where you can still, they try to give you something to take home so that you're not just going home empty-handed. There was one abortion clinic that I saw that actually had little boxes with, various things, but also teddy bears, so that the family could take home like a little teddy bear instead of just, going home empty-handed. There are those considerations made, but there definitely were not those considerations at the Planned Parenthood we went to. And, we ended up at the hospital instead, and the nurses were very kind to us, and the doctor was very sympathetic, and, when I nearly bled out, they saved my life, which is also definitely a perk. And they let us keep our son's ashes. They cremated him as part of the overall procedure. Like they offered us a choice between, we could have had it processed as medical waste, but we didn't want to do that. We could have had him cremated and sent his remains to they had some sort of burial program, some sort of mass grave for stillborn babies, and he could have gone there, and they would have given a ceremony and buried him, like given him a proper burial. And the third option was to collect his ashes after the procedure was over, and we opted to collect his ashes because I looked at it and initially thought, you know, a mass grave for stillborn babies is not a bad place. You know, there's a lot of love in a place like that, and at the same time, I just didn't want him. It didn't seem right. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, you got to do when it comes to processing a loved one's remains. I think you kind of have to do what you think is best. Which, I mean, if you've ever seen a funeral or been part of the planning process for a funeral, you do kind of have to, you know, okay, which flowers do you want to pick out? Which coffin do you want to pick out? Do you want to have your loved one cremated, or do you want to have them buried? And if you want to have them buried, you know, all those options, you have to make those decisions. And so, you know, for us, I kind of wanted to collect his ashes, and we got to do that. And so we waited in the chapel, and they came to us in the chapel and gave us our son's ashes, and it was it was the best possible outcome that I could have imagined or thought to ask for us. You know, it was very kind. It was at all parts of the process in dealing with that hospital. It was very, number one, all of the medical staff knew that it was a non-viable pregnancy. Technically it could have produced a living child. Sometimes those cases do produce living children. And if you have one of those cases, I always want to remind people that you can still possibly give birth to a live baby and put them on hospice or try to keep them alive. There are always those miracle babies who manage to live, you know, 10 years. It seems to be an average of about 10 years. You know, there are those very, very rare cases. Funny, we got back from the hospital, and my mother-in-law told me a story that she had just heard about a woman who had a diagnosis. I don't know if it was the same diagnosis or a similar diagnosis to ours, and decided to keep the baby, and lost the baby at 29 weeks and was just heartbroken because she had been hoping to at least carry to term, and it didn't happen. And that happens. I would technically be 31 weeks pregnant right now. And just the other day I was looking at it and telling my husband, there's a very decent chance that he'd be dead. So yeah, I'm not gonna show you his ashes or anything like that. That just sounds tacky, but I wanted to mention that we had them and that we didn't just forget about him. I've read through stories where people describe their babies as a fetus or an embryo or a little bean, or just they kind of avoid the fact that it's a baby if they've had an abortion. I know it was a baby. It was my baby, and I loved him, and I did the best that I could for him given the circumstances. And he's here. He's right over there. He's with us, and that's important, I think, to us at least. I was looking at pictures. I've looked at many pictures of dead babies, and I've read through all sorts of pro-life things, all sorts of pro-choice things, and I saw one picture in particular. It was a medical tarp, so a red medical tarp with just all of these dead babies lined up on it, and it was a pro-life propaganda thing. You know, if you support women having abortions, you should look at this like every day. And I had to scroll through it multiple times, like not every day, but several times. And every time I looked at it, it was like, I'm so happy my son isn't on that tarp. He's home. He's here with us. And we didn't just discard him. He wasn't unwanted. He wasn't unloved. He's here with us. And I thought it would be important to mention, you know, not every woman who has an abortion just because she doesn't want her baby. Sometimes that's not the way it worked out. And maybe people need to hear that. I think people do need to hear that, actually. Like, not all abortions, and I know I'm an exception to the rule, I know I'm a rare case, but not all abortions occur because somebody just wasn't responsible enough to take care of a baby. Sometimes they occur because you can't make someone live if they're going to die. And so you have to handle that death, and you have to figure out the best way to handle that death. And I think we did that, you know, for our family, for our beliefs, for what we wanted for him, the best that we could give to him under the circumstances, knowing as well as we could, with the best information that we could arm ourselves with, what his life was going to be like. We did the best we could for him. And that's all you can do. I'll talk to you guys later.